right, my guest today was supposed to be Bob Chapman. He didn't show up. And if you missed it in the first, you can catch it in the whole story about the woman that interrupted the House of Representatives while they were reading the Constitution when they got to the part about the qualifications for being a president. I shared that with you. You can hear it up on freeamerican.com on the Bob Chapman page, which is just Clay Douglas today. Okay, now let me see. Okay, we got all that working. And yeah, Uncle's asking me, Clay, do you know anything about Bush Sr. was named Sheriff? S-C-H-E-R-F. Yes, he was. His father was named Sheriff. They changed it to Bush when they came over here, probably as a part of Operation Paperclip, but I'm not sure. There's pictures of George Bush as a kid with his father, Prescott Bush, or Prescott Sheriff. And, okay, let's see what we got here. Okay, this isn't going on here. Let me try to get this open here. See what Grandma had to say. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe I won't even do that. I have earmarked a few things here that we probably should talk about. Not immediately, nothing immediately pressing, except for the fact about the birds that were dying, the fish that are dying, and one of the men responsible are trying to expose this was murdered too. Now let me see if I can pull this up here. Okay. The incredible here. Well, here's something that's interesting. I've got this marked. In late November, Venezuela was hammered by torrential rains and flooding that left 35 people dead and were roughly 130,000 homeless. If George Bush had been president instead of Hugo Chavez, the displaced people would have been shunted off at gunpoint to makeshift prison camps like the Superdome as they were following Hurricane Katrina, but that's not the way Chavez works. Now, President Chavez of Venezuela has been demonized in our press over and over and over again. Again, the Venezuelan presidents, when they had 130,000 homeless, 35 people dead, the Venezuelan president quickly passed enabling laws that gave him special powers to provide emergency aid and funding and housing to flood victims. Chavez then cleared out the presidential palace and turned it into living quarters for 60 people, which is the equivalent of turning the White House into a homeless shelter. The disaster victims are now being fed and taken care of by the state until they can get back on their feet and return to work. The details of Chavez's efforts have been largely omitted in the U.S. media, where he is regularly demonized as a leftist strongman or a dictator. The media refuses to acknowledge that Chavez had narrowed the income gap, eliminated illiteracy, provided health care for all Venezuelans, reduced equality, raised living standards across the board, while Bush and Obama were expanding their foreign wars and pushing through tax cuts for the rich. Chavez was busy improving the lives of poor and needy while fending off the latest wave of U.S. aggression. Washington despises Chavez because he is unwilling to hand over Venezuela's vast resources to corporate elites and bankers. And that's why the Bush administration tried to depose Chavez in a failed coup in 2002, and why the smooth-talking Obama continues to launch covert attacks on Chavez today. Washington wants regime change so it can install a puppet who will hand over Venezuela's resources and reserves to big oil while making life hell for the working people. Folks, that's what they are doing here. Can't you see that? Recently released documents from WikiLeaks, who, by the way, ain't telling you nothing about Israel, and I'll touch on that in a moment. It shows that the Obama administration has stepped up its meddling into Venezuela's internal affairs. Here's an excerpt from a recent post by author and attorney Eva Gollinger in a secret document authored by current Deputy Assistant Secretary of Western Hemisphere Affairs Craig Kelly, and sent out to the U.S. Embassy in Santiago in 2007, to the Secretary of State, CIA, and Southern Command of the Pentagon, along with a series of other U.S. embassies in the region. Kelly proposed 6 main areas of action for U.S. government to limit Chavez's influence and reassert U.S. leadership in the regions. Kelly, who played a primary role as mediator during last year's coup d'etat in Honduras against President Manuel Zelaya, classifies President Hugo Chavez as an enemy in his report. No, the enemy. We have to better understand how Chavez thinks and what he intends to effectively counter the threat he represents. We need to know better his objective and how he intends to pursue them. This requires better intelligence in all of our countries. And further in the memo, Kelly confesses that President Chavez is a formidable foe, but he adds he certainly can be taken. And this is WikiLeaks document confirms U.S. plans against Venezuela. Postcards from the revolution. The State Department cables show that Washington has been funding anti-Chavez groups in Venezuela through non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that pretend to be working for civil liberties, human rights, or democracy promotion. These groups hide behind a facade of legitimacy, but their real purpose is to topple the democratically elected Chavez government. Obama supports this type of subversion just as enthusiastically as did Bush. The only difference is the Obama team is more discreet. Now, here's another clip from Gollinger with some of the details on the money trail. In Venezuela, the U.S. has been supporting anti-Chavez groups for over 8 years, including those executed in the coup against President Chavez in 2002. Since then, the funding has increased substantially. A May 10th report evaluating foreign assistance to political groups in Venezuela, commissioned by the National Endowment for Democracy, revealed more than 40 million U.S. dollars annually is channeled to anti-Chavez groups, the majority from U.S. agencies. Venezuela now stands out as the Latin American nation where NED has National Endowment for Democracy has invested funding in opposition groups during 2009 with 1.8 million U.S. dollars, more than double the year before. Alan Weinstein, another Jewish connection, one of NED's original founders. The Jews are communists. I mean, not all communists are Jews, not all, not all Christians are Christians, are they? So, they're saying Alan Weinstein says what we do today was done clandestinely 25 years ago by the CIA. On Monday, the Obama administration revoked the visa of Venezuela's ambassador to Washington in retaliation for Chavez's rejection of nominee Larry Palmer as American ambassador in Caracas. Palmer's been openly critical of Chavez, saying there were clear ties between the members of Chavez's administration and leftist guerrillas in neighboring Colombia. It's a roundabout way of accusing Chavez of terrorism. Even worse, Palmer's background and personal history suggests his appointment might pose a threat to Venezuela's national security. You consider the comments of James Sugart of Venezuelan Analysis on Axis of Logic Take a look at Palmer's history, working with the U.S.-backed oligarchs in the Dominican Republic, Uruguay, Paraguay, Sierra Leone, South Korea, Honduras, promoting the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, just as the U.S. ruling class appointed an African-American, Barack Obama, to replace George Bush with everything else intact. Obama, in turn, appoints Palmer to replace Patrick Doody, who was involved in the attempted coup against President Chavez in 2002, and an enemy of Venezuela's throughout his term as U.S. ambassador to Venezuela. And Venezuela is always ready, crawling with U.S. spies and saboteurs. They don't need help from agents working inside the embassy. Chavez did the right thing, giving Palmer the thumbs down. Okay. And if you think it's going to be tight now, from Washington here, most members of the coverage of the most of the media coverage of the 2010 census will likely focus on the country's changing racial composition and its redistribution of seats in Congress, but neither of these is the most important finding. Rather, it is the dramatic increase in the size of the U.S. population itself that has profound implications for our nation's quality of life and environment. Most of the increase has been and will continue as a result of one federal policy. Immigration projections into the future from the Census Bureaus show we are on track to add 130 million more people to the U.S. population in just the next 40 years, primarily due to future immigrations. All right, let me see what we're doing here. Okay. All right. Oh, I just love you guys on this talk shoe chat room. Oh, idiot Clay on all his falsehood. Yeah. I am just so sick of these racist idiots. Don't even want to hear. Don't even care to look. You people are idiots here. Okay, that's all I'm dealing with them. All right, what do we got on here? What else we got here? The see if we can do this. See what this is here. I've got this marked, so this should be good. This is, we're talking about the rulers of the world. This is from Project Avalon. Let's see if we can pull this up. No, wait a minute. I don't know if I don't want to do that. Let me go to here. Let me go here. Let's see here. I've got some new films up, and I think this is important. I believe that these people with the chemtrails, the aluminum in the mountains, they are trying to kill us, and they've been doing it for some time. Let's talk about fluoride here. Now this is up on my website, so you can hear the whole thing. But I want to take a look at this. Okay, not letting me do that. All right, just a moment. This is called the fluoride deception. This is a project of American Environmental Health. Now, they've just tried to discredit some doctor for warning you about the vaccines. They say this doctor's been discredited. Vaccines don't cause autism. They're trying to tell you everything's safe. And, of course, they've been telling us that for years with the fluoride deception.
Is corporate science. Fluoride science is DDT science. It's asbestos science. It's tobacco science. It's a racket.
In July of 2004, Christopher Bryson sat down and discussed the findings of his new book, The Fluoride Deception, with Paul Connett of the Fluoride Action Network. The Fluoride Deception was published by 7 Stories Press in May of 2004. The book is based on nearly 10 years of research by Bryson, an award-winning journalist and former producer at the BBC. In this interview, we asked Bryson to introduce us to some of the important individuals and institutions which have played a role in shaping public policy on the toxicity of fluoride and the purported safety of the controversial water fluoridation program.
In 1993, I was working at Rockefeller Center in New York as a radio producer for the BBC, and I got a call from London. There was a local water fluoridation battle in the north of England, in Leeds, and the producers, it was a daytime radio show, You and Yours was the name of the program, and the producer said, "Chris, what do you know about fluoride? What do the Yanks think about fluoride? Is there an American angle?" And it was a very, familiar request to me. Is there an American angle to the story? And I said, look, I don't know fluoride from a hole in the wall. I have no idea about fluoride, but let me make a few phone calls and see if I can't help you out. And my first call was to Ralph Nader in Washington. And I'm not sure why I called Ralph Nader, but look, it was a consumer issue. And Mr. Consumer, Ralph Nader, I thought, let's give him a call. And I got through, and he said, look, I don't know a great deal about water fluoridation, but I've never had terribly good feelings about it. Here are the names of a couple of scientists you ought to speak with. And he gave me the names of Dr. William Hersey, who then and now is a chemist at the Environmental Protection Agency, and Dr. Robert J. Carton. Bob Carton had been with EPA, but at that time was then over at the U.S. Army. And I went down to Washington and met with Dr. Hersey and Dr. Carton, and they explained to me that the safety standards for water fluoridation in this country are based on fraudulent science. Fluoride defenders will say there's 2 stories. There's the industrial story and there's the dental story, and ne'er the twain shall meet. It's not true. The stories are braided very tightly and very profoundly, and they're braided from the beginning. The very first suggestion that fluoride be added to public water supplies was made by a researcher, Gerald Cox, at the Mellon Institute in Pittsburgh. Cox became interested in fluoride because of the suggestion of Francis Frary. That's the letter I uncovered. Francis Frary is the director of the aluminum laboratory for the Aluminum Company of America. He is very concerned about fluoride pollution around aluminum plants. He's very concerned about what the fluoride is doing to the workers inside these aluminum plants. But his suggestion to Gerald Cox is to look at fluoride's dental effects. And it's upon the basis of that suggestion that Gerald Cox makes his proposal to add fluoride to public water supplies. Right at the very source of the stream, you find the aluminum industry.
Aluminum. That's right. Aluminum.
Cox's suggestion that we add fluoride to public water supplies needs to be understood for who was saying it and where he was saying it and what the track record of the Mellon Institute was. The Mellon Institute was a leading defender of asbestos for the asbestos industry. You know, today, industry are facing a tidal wave, a crippling tidal wave of lawsuits from people who have had their health damaged, who've been killed by asbestos. Well, for generations, the Mellon Institute produced research that said that mesothelioma was caused by something other than asbestos. That's how you have to understand the fluoride issue. Industry was concerned about fluoride pollution and about lawsuits of a similar magnitude for fluoride pollution. So it's no coincidence that the Mellon Institute makes the first suggestion that fluoride be added to public water supplies.
All right, what do we got here?
It's quite astonishing, Paul, the degree to which environmentalists have not been educated about fluoride. You know, and you know, I'm a reporter. I'm not a scientist or a doctor. You know, I'm quoting documents. I'm citing lawsuits when I refer to fluoride as a major industrial air pollutant. In fact, the leading air pollutant in the aftermath of the Cold War. Those are not my words. That's not my opinion. That's a quantitative assessment.
Fluoride was responsible, between 1957 and 1968, fluoride was responsible for more damage claims against industry than all 20 nationally monitored air pollutants combined. That's by Dr. Edward Groth, senior scientist. They just showed a picture here of a cow poisoned by fluoride, staggering, couldn't even stand up.
By industry experts of the scale of the lawsuits they were facing.
Fluoride is a protected pollutant.
The most notorious air pollution disaster in U.S. history was the Halloween air pollution incident in Donora, Pennsylvania, a mill town south of Pittsburgh, where a couple of dozen people and several thousand were injured because of effluents coming from a U.S. steel plant, which were trapped by a temperature inversion. In the aftermath of those deaths, a researcher, Philip Stadler, a chemist, Philip Stadler, investigated. He did blood analysis and he measured high levels of fluoride in the blood of some of the injured and the deceased. He published that data along with data which found high levels of fluoride in vegetation and a lot of other circumstantial evidence indicating fluoride poisoning. Sadler published his research in Chemical and Engineering News, but the Public Health Service came in and said that fluoride wasn't responsible. It was a mixture of air pollutants and bad weather that had caused the disaster. Well, I uncovered a memo, Paul, a memo from the Aluminum Company of America, in which they had secretly gotten blood from one of the deceased. And their measurements were almost exactly the same measurements that Philip Sadler found. Laundering fluoride's role in the Donora pollution incident is really emblematic for what has happened for the last half century and an accounting for why environmentalists don't know their own history. Donora jump-started the environmental movement, but environmentalists don't know that Donora was almost certainly caused by fluoride. The book looks very hard at the role of a key scientist, Dr. Harold Hodge, in the fluoride debate. Dr. Harold Hodge, for most of the Cold War, was the leading scientific defender of the safety of low doses of fluoride and the beneficial effects of water fluoridation.
Dr. Harold Hodge, a distinguished toxicologist on the Rochester team, has carefully investigated the safety of fluoridation.
Well, to put it very simply, fluoride is safe at 1 part per million.
No scientist's word was trusted more by the health establishment than Dr. Harold Hodge when it came to fluoride. He was a very senior figure and operated at the highest levels for almost all his scientific career.
This brings us back to the fundamental point. Fluoride is safe and I think I can say in conclusion, that there is no health hazard that justifies postponing water fluoridation.
Harold Hodge, we now know, was a co-orchestrator of the human radiation experiments in which citizens in hospitals in Rochester and in Oak Ridge were injected with plutonium by scientists under Harold Hodge's direction.
And there's a whole book written about